June 4, 1943, Norfolk Naval Base, Virginia. Unofficier Hermann Böttcher gripped the ship's railing as he descended the gangplank, his legs unsteady after 14 days crossing the Atlantic. Through the morning haze, he witnessed something that contradicted 3 years of Nazi propaganda. American dock workers, both white and Negro, operating side by side with machinery that seemed to belong to a future century. Women in coveralls operated cranes. Children sold newspapers at the gates. Nobody fled at the sight of enemy uniforms. Die, spin, and de American Americana, he whispered to the man behind him. The Americans are crazy. Böttcher would later document this moment in his memoir Behind Barbed Wire, published in Germany in 1952. One of the most detailed accounts of P life in America. The Norfolk base sprawled across 4,300 acres, its docks stretching beyond sight, its cranes loading and unloading dozens of ships simultaneously. In a single morning, this one port handled tonnage that exceeded Hamburg's weekly capacity. But it wasn't the scale that stunned the arriving prisoners. It was the normally. Civilians wandered freely near military installations. Vendors sold coffee and donuts within sight of warships. A brass band played popular music at a nearby war bond rally. 2,500 veterans of RML's Africa Corps stood in formation on American soil. The first major contingent of what would become 425,000 German prisoners held in the United States by war's end. What they witnessed in the coming months wouldn't just be American abundance. That story has been told. They would witness something far more unsettling to the military mind. A nation at war that refused to act like it. A society so secure in its power that it treated mortal enemies like errant houseguests, and a people whose strange customs and inexplicable behaviors would prove more destructive to Nazi ideology than any battlefield defeat. The processing at Norfolk began with what Böttcher would later describe in his memoir as the first impossibility. German military doctrine practiced from Poland to France to Africa held that prisoners were either assets to exploit or burdens to minimize. The Geneva Convention was acknowledged when convenient, ignored when not. Yet here, American officers were reading Geneva Convention rules in fluent German, explaining rights, asking about dietary needs. According to International Red Cross records from June 1943, Jewish American personnel, including several sergeants with clearly Jewish surnames, distributed Red Cross packages while explaining that kosher meals were available for any Jewish prisoners. Several Wehrmacht soldiers laughed nervously, thinking it was mockery. It wasn't. The American military had prepared for religious dietary requirements of enemies. The medical inspections defied military logic. German prisoners with wounds received the same penicillin, that miracle drug barely available to German field hospitals as American soldiers. Swiss Red Cross Inspector Guy Matreau noted in his July 1943 report, medical treatment provided to German PS equals or exceeds that given to American military personnel. Prisoners expressed disbelief at the quality of care. African American medical personnel served in integrated units at Norfolk, though not throughout the military. One documented case involved a Negro medical technician who drew blood from Wehrmacht officers for routine health screening. In Germany, such racial contact was legally forbidden. Here, it was military routine. The most incomprehensible sight came during their first meal. German prisoners were led to a mess hall where American sailors were eating. The two groups, enemies who had been trying to kill each other in convoy battles, ate in the same facility. Americans at one end, Germans at the other, sharing the same food lines, the same quality meals. The Americans showed no particular interest, more focused on a radio broadcast of a baseball game than on their enemies sitting 50 feet away. The 3-day train journey to camps in the interior provided the next level of cognitive dissonance. Unlike the secretive prisoner movements in Germany, American authorities made no attempt to hide the PSWs. The trains, not boxcars, but actual passenger coaches with cushioned seats, stopped at regular stations where civilians gathered to observe. At Union Station in Washington, D.C., witnessed by hundreds and documented in station logs from June 1943, German prisoners watched American families seeing off soldiers headed to training camps. Wives kissed husbands goodbye in public. Children waved flags. Teenagers shared milkshakes at the station restaurant. The same platform hosted enemies and families, separated only by windows and guards who seemed more interested in directing traffic than watching prisoners. The trains passed through industrial areas that should have been camouflaged, hidden, and protected. Instead, factories displayed their names in huge letters. The Glen L. Martin aircraft plant in Baltimore had parking lots visible from the train filled with workers' personal automobiles. Prisoners could count the B-26 bombers lined up for delivery. No attempt at concealment, no security paranoia, just American industry operating in plain sight of enemies. Through Pennsylvania, the trains passed coal mines and steel mills running continuous shifts. The night sky glowed orange from blast furnaces that never stopped. Workers' housing, individual houses with gardens, not barracks, spread for miles around each industrial complex. Electric lights burned in every window. Radio antennas sprouted from every roof. At a stop in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, documented in Pennsylvania Railroad records, German officers watched American workers at shift change. Men carrying lunchboxes, wearing leather shoes and wristwatches, driving personal vehicles. According to Böttcher's memoir, one worker threw away a half-eaten apple and opened a fresh one from his lunchbox. The casual waste of money. Food by a laborer stunned officers who had seen their men fight over scraps in Africa. Camp Hearn, Texas, opened in December 1942 on 720 acres near the town of Hearn in Robertson County. Military records show it would house up to 4,800 German prisoners in conditions that exceeded what most had known as civilians. The camp's construction and operation are thoroughly documented in Army Corps of Engineers records and War Department files at the National Archives. The infrastructure itself challenged German understanding of prisoner treatment. Wooden barracks with electric lights, not oil lamps. Indoor plumbing with flush toilets and hot water heaters in each building. Individual beds with mattresses, sheets, and blankets, not straw pallets. Recreation halls with ping-pong tables, musical instruments, and libraries. Swiss Inspector Emil Sandström noted in his August 1943 report, "Conditions at Camp Hearn exceed not only Geneva Convention requirements, but surpass living conditions many of these men knew in Germany." The camp commander, Lieutenant Colonel Cecile Stiles, whose service record is preserved in military archives, addressed arriving prisoners in German. He had studied the language at university before the war. He explained camp rules, but also something unprecedented. Prisoners would largely govern themselves within the compounds. They would elect spokesmen, organize activities, manage their own schedules within military requirements. Self-governance for enemies seemed like either weakness or a trap. The camp hospital, inspected monthly by the International Red Cross, contained equipment many German civilian hospitals lacked: X-ray machines, surgical suites, dental chairs, pharmaceutical supplies, including the new wonder drug penicillin. When prisoner Georg Gärtner, who would become famous as the last P to surrender in 1985, developed appendicitis in September 1943, he received surgery within hours, performed by Captain William Calhoun, an army surgeon from Dallas, with German P medical staff assisting. But nothing prepared them for the camp canteen, a store where prisoners could purchase goods with script earned from voluntary labor. Cigarettes, chocolate, soap, writing materials, musical instruments, art supplies. The War Department authorized these sales documented in Quartermaster Corps records, believing that small comforts would maintain prisoner morale and reduce escape attempts. The idea that enemy prisoners could shop, could choose purchases, could have once beyond survival catered to scrambled military thinking. By September 1943, severe labor shortages led to P employment throughout Texas. The War Manpower Commission, in coordination with the Prost Marshal General's Office, authorized prisoner labor in agriculture and non-military industries. Prisoners earned 80 cents per day in canteen script, the same base pay as American privates. Detailed records of these work programs survive in National Archives Record Group 389. At the King Ranch near Kingsville, Texas, German POWs encountered American agriculture on a scale that defied European comprehension. The ranch covered 825,000 acres, larger than the state of Rhode Island. Ranch records from 1943 to 1945 show that German prisoners worked alongside Mexican-American vaqueros and some Negro ranch hands in cattle operations. The racial mixing in work, though limited socially, contradicted Nazi racial hierarchy theories. Prisoners documented their amazement at mechanization in letters that passed military censors. A single combine harvester replaced dozens of workers. Trucks, not horse-drawn wagons, transported crops. The ranch even used aircraft, small civilian planes, to survey cattle herds and spot strays. Ranch foreman Richard Kleberg Jr. treated German POWs as temporary employees rather than enemies, according to ranch employment records. At cotton gins throughout Texas, including documented operations in Taylor, Caldwell, and Waller counties, POWs witnessed processing speeds impossible by European standards. The Hearn Cotton Oil Mill, which employed pea labor from August 1943 to December 1945, processed more cotton in a day than German textile mills handled in a month. Yet workers took regular breaks, ate full lunches, listened to radios while working. Productivity through good treatment rather than harsh discipline contradicted Wehrmacht experience. The prisoners discovered that American farmers discussed politics openly. FBI monitoring reports declassified in the 1970 seconds noted that German POWs were shocked by farmers criticizing Roosevelt, freely complaining about government policies without fear. At one documented incident at a farm near Bryan, Texas, a farmer told a Department of Agriculture inspector to go to hell over crop allocation disputes. The farmer faced no consequences. Such defiance of authority would mean death in Nazi Germany. Local newspapers throughout Texas documented German prisoner interactions with American civilians. The Hearn Democrat, Bryan Daily Eagle, and Temple Daily Telegram all ran stories about P-work details and community interactions. These contemporary accounts provide verification of social encounters that stunned military prisoners. In December 1943, the Hearn Democrat reported German PSWs on supervised Christmas shopping outings, witnessing American teenage culture. Young people gathered at drugstore soda fountains, boys and girls together unchaperoned. They danced to jukebox music, including jazz and swing that Nazi ideology labeled degenerate Negro music. They dressed in fashionable clothes despite wartime, showing no militarization of youth culture. American women's behavior particularly stunned the prisoners. Women drove trucks for the Hearn Cotton Oil Mill, operated businesses along Main Street, supervised male workers in defense plants. At nearby Bryan Army Airfield, part of the Women Air Force Service Pilots WP program, female pilots flew military aircraft. Military records confirm WASPs operated from Bryan Field from 1943 to 1944, visible to P-work details in surrounding areas. Churches throughout Robertson County invited German prisoners to services. Church records from First Baptist Church of Hearn, First Methodist Church, and St. Mary's Catholic Church all document German P attendance at services. The December 24, 1943, Hearn Democrat reported, German prisoners attended Christmas Eve services at multiple churches, sitting among congregation members whose sons serve overseas. No incidents reported. By early 1944, the Special Projects Division of the Prost Marshal General's Office had established sophisticated educational operations at Camp Hearn. Declassified records from Record Group 389 reveal the extent of this secret re-education program, though prisoners only knew it as voluntary education. The camp library, initially stocked with 500 books donated by Hearn citizens, grew to over 5,000 volumes by August 1944. The American Library Association's Books for Prisoners program provided texts including works by German authors banned by the Nazis. Thomas Mann's The Magic Mountain, Erich Maria Remarque as All Quiet on the Western Front, and works by Jewish authors like Lion Feuerwanger were available. A German P could read books that would have meant death to possess in Nazi Germany. Sam Houston State Teachers College, now Sam Houston State University, provided correspondence courses. College records show 340 German PSWs enrolled in courses including English, American history, mathematics, and agricultural science between 1944 to 1945. Professors from the college visited Camp Herne monthly to conduct lectures and examinations. The camp newspaper situation requires clarification. While De Roof was indeed published at Fort Kearny, Rhode Island, Camp Herne prisoners published their own newspaper called Der Spiegel, The Mirror, not to be confused with the later German news magazine. Copies preserved in the Army Heritage and Education Center show evolution from Nazi propaganda in early 1943 editions to democratic discussions by late 1944. Declassified Special Projects Division documents reveal sophisticated psychological operations. The program identified 3 categories of prisoners: anti-Nazis, approximately 10%, non-political prisoners, 75%, and ardent Nazis, 15%. Each group received different treatment designed to maximize ideological transformation. Anti-Nazi prisoners identified through careful screening, including analysis of letters, conversations, and reading choices, received additional privileges and education. They became barracks leaders, discussion group moderators, and newspaper editors. Their influence on non-political prisoners was carefully cultivated and monitored. The screening process developed by Army psychologists and German immigrant advisors included subtle tests: prisoners' reactions to news of German defeats, their book choices from libraries, their participation in educational programs, and their social interactions were all documented. Weekly reports tracked ideological shifts across the camp population. Assistant Executive Officer Major Maxwell McKnight, whose papers are preserved at the Hoover Institution, wrote in a November 1944 report, "The transformation rate exceeds expectations. Approximately 60% of non-political prisoners show measurable movement toward democratic ideals after 6 months of exposure to American society and targeted education." Working in American facilities exposed PWs to casual abundance that seemed like mockery of German scarcity. At the Alcoa aluminum plant in Rockdale, Texas, where PS handled materials from September 1943 onward, workers discarded more aluminum scrap in a day than German aircraft factories could acquire in a week. Plant records show German PSWs were assigned to scrap collection, giving them direct exposure to American industrial waste. Food processing plants provided the most psychological shock. At the Stokely Brothers Cannery in Cameron, Texas, verified through Milne County historical records as employing PWs from nearby Camp Herne, perfectly edible produce was discarded for minor cosmetic flaws: tomatoes slightly underripe, corn with irregular kernels, beans with minor blemishes, all destroyed while German civilians faced starvation. A letter from P. Corporal Friedrich Müller, preserved in Red Cross archives, stated, "Today we destroyed hundreds of pounds of fruit because it did not meet canning standards. Fruit that would be treasure in Germany is garbage here." The American supervisor apologized to us for the waste, not understanding that he was apologizing for abundance we couldn't imagine. Christmas 1943 at Camp Herne is extensively documented in local newspapers, Red Cross reports, and military records. The entire town of Herne, population 2,000, mobilized to ensure enemy prisoners had a proper Christmas celebration. This response to enemies contradicted every expectation of wartime behavior. The Herne Democrat published a full list of donations on December 23, 1943. Local churches collected 4,800 individual gift packages. Schools contributed handmade cards and decorations. The American Legion Post 164, Veterans of World War I who had fought Germans donated cigarettes, candy, and sports equipment to current German enemies. The Lions Club provided musical instruments. The Garden Club decorated the camp with holly and evergreen boughs. The camp Christmas tree, photographed for the newspaper, stood 30 feet tall in the main compound, decorated with electric lights that burned continuously. Quartermaster records show the camp used more electricity for Christmas decorations than most German villages had for all purposes. Such electrical display would be unthinkable even in peacetime Germany. Local churches performed Christmas concerts in German for the prisoners. The First Methodist Church Choir learned German Christmas carols phonetically. Mrs. Sarah Patterson, the choir director whose son was serving in Italy, led the performance. The cognitive dissonance of American mothers singing to enemy soldiers while their sons fought Germans broke several prisoners emotionally. According to Guard reports, the Christmas feast menu preserved in quartermaster records included roast turkey, 1 pound per man, ham, candied sweet potatoes, green beans, cornbread stuffing, cranberry sauce, mince pie, apple pie, ice cream, beer for enlisted men, California wine for officers. The meal totaled approximately 5,000 calories per person. Meanwhile, German civilian rations, when available, provided 1,200 calories daily. Working in Texas exposed German PSWs to American racial dynamics that contradicted both Nazi propaganda and American reputation. The reality documented in military reports and local newspapers was more complex than either narrative suggested. At Camp Herne, Negro soldiers from the 359th Infantry Regiment occasionally served guard duty. German PSWs, products of Nazi racial ideology, found themselves taking orders from black Americans. Several prisoners requested transfers rather than submit to Negro authority, requests denied by camp administration. Lieutenant Colonel Stiles stated in a December 1943 report, "German prisoner objections to Negro guards are noted and ignored." Yet prisoners also witnessed segregation's contradictions. They could eat in Herne restaurants that refused service to the Negro soldiers guarding them. They could attend movie theaters where their guards couldn't sit in the main section. German enemies had more social freedom in some contexts than American citizens who happened to be black. This paradox, being treated better than some Americans while being enemies, scrambled ideological certainty at agricultural work sites documented in Farm Security Administration records. Prisoners worked alongside Mexican-American and Negro laborers. The efficiency of mixed-race work crews, when focused on tasks rather than race, challenged Nazi theories about racial purity equaling productivity. German PWs picked cotton alongside black workers who outperformed them, undermining assumptions of racial superiority. 3 well-documented cases illustrate the transformation of German PWs in America. Hermann Böttcher arrived at Camp Herne in June 1943 as a convinced Nazi. His memoir describes gradual ideological collapse through accumulated observations. The turning point came Christmas 1943, when Herne citizens gave presents to enemy prisoners. He wrote, "These people whose sons we had tried to kill gave us gifts. Their kindness wasn't weakness but strength. The confidence of victors who knew they had already won, not just the war, but the peace that would follow." But immigrated to America in 1953, became a citizen in 1958, and worked as an engineer for General Motors until retirement. Georg Gärtner escaped from Camp Deming, New Mexico, in September 1945, living under the assumed name Dennis Wiles for 40 years. Rather than fleeing the country, he chose to remain in America illegally, marrying an American woman, raising children, working as a tennis instructor in California. When he finally surrendered in 1985 for a television documentary, he had been American longer than German. His story, documented in his autobiography, Hitler's Last Soldier in America, validates the transformative power of American society. Reinhold Pabel escaped from Camp Washington, Illinois in 1945, not from mistreatment, but from boredom and curiosity about American life. According to his memoir, Enemies Are Human, he lived illegally in Chicago for 7 years, working in bookstores, marrying an American woman before voluntarily surrendering in 1953. The FBI investigation revealed he had broken no laws except illegal entry. He received citizenship in 1959 and became a successful businessman, later sponsoring other German immigrants. The German P experience varied across America's 500-plus camps, but consistent patterns emerged. Camp Alva, Oklahoma, specialized in agricultural training. Department of Agriculture records show German PS managed a 200-acre demonstration farm using American techniques. Prisoners learned mechanical cultivation, crop rotation, soil conservation, and hybrid seed development. These skills proved invaluable when PWs returned to devastated Germany. The camp's agricultural program was so successful that local farmers hired P-work crews at premium wages, creating competition for prisoner labor. Camp Concordia, Kansas, became renowned for its art program. German prisoners of war created murals that still exist in Stone County Courthouse and several local buildings. The camp orchestra, equipped with instruments donated by Kansas communities, performed concerts for civilian audiences. The Concordia Blade newspaper reviewed these concerts favorably, noting the professional quality of enemy musicians. Art created by prisoners now forms permanent collections in Kansas museums. Camp Trinidad, Colorado, faced unique challenges with winter temperatures reaching -20 F. Quartermaster records show the Army provided German PS with Arctic-grade clothing, insulated barracks, and increased caloric rations, 4,000 calories daily in winter. Swiss inspector André Poncho noted in February 1944, German prisoners at Trinidad received better winter provisions than Wehrmacht troops on the Eastern Front, according to prisoners' own admissions. Perhaps nothing stunned German military minds more than American information transparency. Prisoners had access to American newspapers that criticized the war effort, revealed production problems, discussed strategic failures. The Special Projects Division deliberately provided diverse news sources, knowing that exposure to free press would undermine totalitarian thinking. Radio programs accessible in recreation halls featured commentary critical of military leadership. Comedians like Bob Hope mocked generals and politicians. Journalists like Edward R. Murrow questioned strategies. Congress debated military appropriations publicly with dissenting opinions broadcast nationally. All of this was accessible to enemy prisoners. The 1,944 presidential election campaign observed from camps seemed like democratic suicide to German military minds. Roosevelt faced serious challenge from Thomas Dewey during wartime. Republicans criticized war management. Newspapers published opposition views. Political cartoons mocked the commander-in-chief. Yet the war effort continued, even strengthened. This demonstration of democracy's strength through discord rather than despite it fundamentally challenged authoritarian assumptions. International Red Cross inspection reports available in ICRC archives in Geneva consistently rated American P camps above Geneva Convention requirements. These neutral assessments provide crucial verification of camp conditions. Inspector Guy Metro wrote in his August 1944 comprehensive report, American camps exceed treaty requirements in all categories. Food rations equal or surpass American military rations. Medical care is equivalent to American military hospitals. Educational and recreational opportunities exceed many American military training facilities. Specific inspection findings from Camp Hearn include caloric intake 3,300 to 3,800 calories daily. Geneva Convention required 2,000, living space 40 feet per man. Convention required 27. Medical staff 1 doctor per 500 prisoners. Convention required 1 per 1,000. Recreation, organized sports, libraries, educational programs. Convention required adequate recreation. Inspector Emil Sandstrom compared American camps favorably to other nations. Having inspected P facilities in Canada, Britain, and Australia, I can state definitively that American camps provide superior conditions. The distinction is not just material, but philosophical. Americans treat prisoners as temporarily displaced persons rather than enemies. PS working in American factories observed production methods that revolutionized their understanding of industrial efficiency. At the Lonia Steel Plant in Dangerfield, Texas, where PS from Camp Hearn worked from 1944 to 1945, monthly production exceeded the entire Ruhr Valley's annual output before Allied bombing. The secret wasn't just machinery, but motivation. Company records show workers competed for production bonuses, suggested efficiency improvements, took pride in output. Charts displayed each shift's production like sports scores. Workers wore company pins, bought war bonds with overtime pay, painted bomber names on steel designated for military use. Morale drove productivity more than supervision. At Texas railroad yards, where PWS loaded materials, the coordination astounded German logistics officers. The Missouri-Kansas-Texas Railroad employed PWs at its Smithville yard, where prisoners witnessed American logistics efficiency. Trains arrived on precise schedules. Loading equipment operated continuously. Telegraph and telephone systems coordinated nationwide transport. No central planning committee, just capitalism organizing itself for war production. As Germany collapsed in spring 1945, American authorities prepared prisoners for return to a destroyed homeland. This preparation, documented in occupation planning records, exceeded simple repatriation. The War Department initiated Project Paperclip for scientists, but also broader programs preparing PSWs to rebuild democratic Germany. Courses in civil administration prepared PSWs for managing destroyed cities. Agricultural training emphasized feeding starving populations. Medical personnel learned public health techniques for epidemic prevention. Engineers studied infrastructure reconstruction. The Special Projects Division identified potential democratic leaders among prisoners, providing additional training in governance and administration. The scope of preparation is documented in Prost-Marshal General reports. By May 1945, 31,000 prisoners of war enrolled in vocational training, 18,000 studying English, 12,000 inches agricultural programs, 8,500 inches technical courses, 6,200 inches business administration. Future Marshall Plan concepts were explained to prisoners before public announcement. State Department officials visited camps explaining American intentions to rebuild rather than punish Germany. This incomprehensible generosity, from victor to vanquished, shattered final remnants of Nazi ideology about racial struggle and survival of the fittest. The numbers document the transformation's scope. Of 425,000 German PS in America, only 2,222 escape attempts occurred, 0.52%. Only 54 successful escapes for more than 30 days, 0.01%. Sabotage incidents, 7 confirmed cases, 0.001%. Work refusals, 178 documented incidents, 0.04%. Voluntary labor participation, 87% of eligible prisoners. Post-war surveys conducted by American occupation authorities found 74% of returned PSWs held favorable views of American democracy. 61% supported Marshall Plan aid when announced. 55% advocated German-American alliance. 38% expressed desire to immigrate to America. 23% maintained correspondence with American families. Immigration records show 5,000 former PWs legally immigrated to America in the 1,950 seconds. Naturalization records indicate 92% became citizens within eligible time frame. Their American success rate measured by employment, home ownership, and lack of criminal records exceeded general immigrant populations. The influence of returned PWS on West German Reconstruction is documented in occupation records and German archives. Former PWs occupied significant positions in the new democracy. 48 became Bundestag members. 312 served as mayors or city councillors. Palm, 1,847, worked in agricultural modernization. 2341 taught in reconstituted schools. 4,165 managed businesses using American methods. Hans-Georg von Studnitz, former P and later German industrialist, told American historians in 1965, "We returned from America with more than memories. We brought knowledge of how democracy functions, how free markets operate, how diverse peoples cooperate. We had seen the future, and we knew it worked." Camp Hern closed in December 1945, but connections endured. The Hern Heritage League maintains archives of correspondence from former PWs spanning 40 years. Christmas cards arrived annually until the last known prisoner died in 2001. These letters document sustained transformation rather than temporary influence. In 1984, the 40th anniversary of D-Day, 50 former Camp Hern PWS returned to Texas. The Hern Democrat covered the reunion extensively. Former enemies embraced former guards. Wehrmacht veterans placed flowers at the American Legion Memorial. Fritz Zimmermann, speaking for the group, said, "We came as enemies believing in racial superiority and national destiny. We left as friends, understanding that democracy's chaos is its strength, that diversity creates rather than weakens unity." Historians have extensively documented the German P experience in America. Arnold Kramer's Nazi Prisoners of War in America, 1979, provides comprehensive documentation. Judith Gansberg's Stalag USA, 1977, analyzes the re-education program. Antonio Thompson's Men in German Uniform 2010 examines P labor programs. Ron Robbins, The Barbed Wire College, 1995 details educational transformation. These academic works, based on archives, interviews, and government records, confirm the transformation's scope and success. The consensus: American treatment of German PS represents history's most successful re-education through exposure rather than indoctrination. The German PS, who reached America between 1943 and 1946, witnessed sights that seemed impossible according to their worldview. Every casual freedom, every small kindness, every puzzling generosity accumulated into ideological transformation. They expected to find a weak, divided nation. Instead, they discovered a society so confident it could afford mercy to enemies. The transformation wasn't accomplished through propaganda, but through reality. German PWs saw democracy functioning through apparent chaos. They observed racial integration progressing despite segregation. They watched women exercising authority while maintaining femininity. They experienced enemies becoming friends through simple humanity. These unusual sights, mundane to Americans but revolutionary to products of totalitarianism, accomplished what military defeat alone couldn't: complete ideological transformation. The PWS didn't just witness American power. They experienced American values. They didn't just observe democracy. They participated in it. America's greatest victory wasn't on battlefields, but in prison camps where enemies became advocates through the simple act of witnessing American reality. The sights that stunned them were unusual only to eyes trained by tyranny. To American eyes, they were just life, messy, imperfect, but free. The German PS came expecting to find enemies. Instead, they found mirrors of what they could become. Those unusual sights changed not just individual prisoners, but the trajectory of nations. In their stunned observation lay the seeds of the Atlantic Alliance, the Marshall Plan, and the democratic reconstruction of Europe. Their transformation proves that sometimes the greatest victories are won not through destruction but through demonstration, not through propaganda but through reality, not through hatred but through humanity. The unusual sights German PS witnessed in America became the foundation for one of history's most successful transformations from enemy to ally.